back on, Costa.
We're back on. Well, I just did a little test run, and I hope you could appreciate what I was saying, sort of on mute. Anyway, we're going the full rewind here.
It's all good.
So, good evening, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed seeing the film Polyfaces. I'm really pleased to be joined tonight by a big part of the filmmaking team, Darren and Lisa, and I'll introduce you to them shortly. And of course, we have Helen and Mike from Carbonate, who are responsible for this wonderful regular gathering that I'm really excited about and keen to ask them a little bit about it, so that you can learn a little bit about more about their background and what's motivating them to present these films and rattle these ideas around on a Saturday night. Now, we've got a Q&A. There is a chat here, so please use the chat. I'll be looking at that while we're talking, and I'd love to throw some of your questions at Helen and Mike and Lisa and Darren during the Q&A. Now, if you've just finished the film and you need a comfort stop, don't hesitate. If you need a cuppa, I won't be offended if I see you walking off to the kitchen, because I'll just speak up. Oh, there goes Daz.
Uh-oh.
There goes
Not you.
Actually, I might be offended.
He's 53. He's 53.
Sorry, mate, it's a bit loose these days.
No, I realise you've just been sitting there for an hour and a half. I know what it's like. And, you know, if you want to go and make some popcorn or whatever, just carry the live stream with you so that you can hear what's going on. Now, before, and of course, the first thing I ask you is, can you jump in the chat and tell us where you're sitting? Where are you? What state, what town? And as I move towards doing an acknowledgement, I'd love it if you could tell me what country you are on, what Indigenous country you are on, just so people can see and learn those connections. And of course, if you're outside Australia, I'd love to see where you're joining us from, which is a buzz for all of us to see that popping up in the chat. So feel free to jump in there. Now, we're going to use the chat. So if you've got any questions for Helen and Mike and Darren and Lisa, don't hesitate to put them up there and I'll feed them through. They'll see them. They'll answer some things as well. There's Darren and Lisa have just put in their location. Now, so Biggie has just asked me, unfortunately, even though it was advertised, Joel is unable to join us tonight because he's got a commitment which he couldn't juggle, and with the time frame, it just made it difficult for him, and unfortunately he had to pull out. So
3:30 in the morning where he is, Costa.
Yeah, which is another difficult detail, as you can imagine. I'm devastated.
So are we.
He dumped me.
But
anyway,
poached eggs aren't good enough.
yeah, that's another story. We won't even knock the scab off that one. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the country that I'm on. I'm up in Sydney, in North Bondi, on Bidjigal and Gadigal country. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Indigenous people joining us for this broadcast. Darren and Lisa are broadcasting to us from Jajawaran country in Victoria, and Mike and Helen are coming to us on Gamilaroi country up in northern New South Wales. So a big welcome to you all, and I suppose what I'd like to do, given that we've just watched the film, given that you've seen what the filmmakers wanted to do, or what's been produced, and I thought to have to have Darren and Lisa here. Lisa is director, and their daughter Isabella was she filmed and co-directed it with Lisa. Isabella unfortunately can't be with us, but I thought I'd start by saying, as a family, you all worked closely on the production. What most people don't realise, you watch a film, it finishes and you go, yeah, okay, I'll just dive into the issues. But I think it's really important because storytelling is key these days. When you look at media, when you look at information, when you look at facts and truth, it is such a juggernaut. And for the family to be involved in this production over many years, I just want to start off, and ask you, Lisa, tell us a little bit about what drove you to make the film and how long the process unfolded over.
Well, I believe that we are our stories. That's basically, as humans, that's what we have. And there were a lot of films at the time, well, not a lot, there was a few films at the time that were looking at the negatives of conventional farming. And we have been working with producers for a long time, and we thought the way that we could actually change farming is by going to the consumer and showing them that there is another option. We were based in Mallorca, a little island off Spain at the time, and we decided, Darren was flying back to Australia to do a workshop with Joel in Melbourne. When he got back, he said, I think we should make a documentary about Polyface. So we started in September 2011, and we often do world tours with our agrarians workshops. So whenever we were near Virginia, we would go and do some more filming. Then Isabella was based in London for a couple of years, so she would fly back and do some filming. And then with her partner Andreas, they did some filming. So it was actually, and Pearl and Zane, we all did something. Pearl and Zane were quite young, and then they sort of grew up in the film. I produced, co-directed and co-filmed. Darren had the idea. And then it was on hard drives in his office. And I said, we've done all this filming. What are we going to do? And he said, I'm too busy. I'm too busy with, my online workshops. He said, can you do it? So it was a big project because we had raised $150,000 to build our house, which we ended up spending on the film. And our budget was actually very, very small for a feature documentary. We ended up spending about $350,000, which is not much at all. Most feature documentaries spend at least, $750,000 to $1 million and, onwards. So we did a lot of, what's the word?
Conscious. Yeah.
We like crowdfunding, but just within our network. So we didn't actually do a
Kickstarter.
We didn't do a Kickstarter or anything. We just put it out to our network, and luckily we've got some generous clients and friends, and so they supported the project. And yeah, it was 4 years. So 4 years of filming. Then we came back. We did all the post-production in Victoria. Our editor was from Castlemaine. Our composer was from Malden. So we moved to Castlemaine from Bendigo, and we spent that year in 2015 just working on the film. We qualified for the Academy, so we submitted to the academies and we qualified. And we, as part of the submission for the Oscars, you have to do a week run in LA and a week run in New York. So Joel very kindly came to screenings in LA and New York, and we had Q&A after screenings. We woke up one morning to a New York Times review, which was pretty exciting. Like, we were in New York, and, a girl from Bendigo, and there I was with a review in the New York Times. And then we had a week screening in New York, so it was very exciting. We've won awards all over the world. We did a tour with going to different film festivals and won some beautiful awards, which we've got on our mantelpiece, and along with photos of Costa.
Don't worry
So
about
yeah,
that.
it was a great family project, and I'm very proud of it. And it continues to inspire people. We still get messages from people from all over the world. It's still being screened at film festivals all over the world. So it's I think it was worth all the hard work, and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've just got to congratulate you. Yeah, we've been working with farmers for a long time. I've been consulting for 30 odd years and had come to this realization that the farmers are actually quite adaptive, and one of the places that we could get the best leverage was if people that are buying food understand the power of that food dollar. And you guys have brought that into a beautiful story, and you've done that. You've had the foresight to start on that project years ago when, regenerative agriculture was still a very early stage idea for a lot of people. So you've shown tremendous foresight, and you've put together something that's absolutely amazing. And I think every kid should watch it, Yeah.
Well, Michael Pollan said if, he saw that as a teenager, he would have wanted to be a farmer. Like, he couldn't imagine, not seeing that and not being inspired to be a farmer. And a lot of young people have actually watched it and been inspired.
Yeah, well, everyone on the chat's really inspired. We've got a few comments there saying it's the best regen ag movie they've ever seen.
Thank you, Robin Todd and Rachel Treasure. We love you, Rachel Treasure.
So Daz, my question to you at this sort of discussing the film and its emerging, like you worked on it from a family point of view, but through your work as a permaculturist, as a regenerative agriculture educator, farm designer, all of the work that you do you feel like, and as Lisa said, it was your idea in that sense, do you feel like the intent you set out with as someone so intimately involved with these issues and challenges, do you feel like that intent came together as you had hoped?
Yeah, thanks, Costa. The original treatment that I came up with was more or less that we wanted to have a film that and it was interesting.
A series.
A series, but we also that we wanted to have a piece or something that followed the sort of narrative style of Australian story, which for those people who are not from Australia, perhaps wouldn't understand that, but there's a very old or long-running Australian national or public TV show called Australian Story, and it has a particular narrative style, which is I've always liked, and it's often featured rural Australians. And but to have that married with the cinematography quality of someone like David Attenborough and his beautiful series that we've all grown up with, because the cinematography that I remember Bill Mollison, the co-founder of permaculture, years ago saying something like, we're going. All these people are getting excited about nature. They're probably going in to watch Our Living Planet by David Attenborough, and that's their nature fix. And because it is so beautiful, and it gives you an eye that you can't see normally because of a camera. The cinematography is so special. So I had some dreams which came through. I had a particular manure shot, which you'd appreciate, Costa, that I didn't quite get. We spent a lot of money on this particular camera because I had this. So I never got this, did I, darling? It was when a cow is in a field.
Oh, please.
And it thinks that it's going to have a
warning.
It's going to have a moment. Let's just say, in your parlance, saw your beautiful late father a comfort stop. that there's a moment, and having watched a cow do that occasionally over my life, I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful to just show, because, you know, I just wanted to show, because we see so often, you know, the super slow-mo of a cheetah taking down an antelope or an ant, or you know, doing something, but we never see that with anything in agriculture. It's always something. Well, agriculture just doesn't get shown, right? Because agriculture is separated from nature. It's separated. I can't recall that David Attenborough's ever done anything on the nature of agriculture, on agroecologies. And so I thought, well, here's a cow, you know, this megafauna that's replaced so much megafauna, and yet we don't actually see the power of the cow. And the power of the cow is, one, its action of eating, and two, the action of its enteric digestion, and three, there's another output that comes out of that. And a cow thinks about that, and you can sort of see it. And then it comes out, and then it lands, and then you've got this whole ecology that just swarms literally to that landed mass. And that's regeneration right there. So you've got, you know, this relatively poor material called grass going through a digestion, coming out. And I just thought that what a wonderful super slow-mo to capture that whole thing, and the manure splashing into the air, and the whole thing. You'd almost smell it.
You wouldn't have one up on David Attenborough.
And then he went to Greece. He went to Greece and left me to get the manure shot with the maggots, which was not an easy shot to get.
Yeah.
Because you have to find a pat that's in good shape, and then you have to watch it for days, and then you have to be there at the right time when the maggots come out.
Put a little flag by the manure. You have to find. Yeah, got to get the maggots at the right stage. So we got some of that stuff. I was a bit raving a bit there because I did have that shot in mind, but it's but you know, that was part of what we wanted to capture. And I think Lisa, I mean, I had very little to do with it apart from the inception and walking around and doing a little scratching here and there and carrying stuff and all of the rest of it, and sitting by Lisa while she's literally slaved away with Isabella and the editors for months on end in 2015, pulling together all of this disparate footage. I mean, it's a huge amount. We had, I think we had like 40 gigabytes or terabytes, I should say, of footage. I mean, it was a huge amount of material to get through. And they were able to pull it off. And yeah, it was an amazing thing. So I think the film is phenomenal. And adding to what you said earlier and others have seen, is that it's a relatively timeless piece. And I think it's not going to have a use by date. I think that there's a lot of it that will carry on for some time. Yeah, it's just a great story. So I think Lisa pulled off the treatment with some, I should say.
Yeah. So, okay, from that framework, enter Mike and Helen. As you said just, Mike, you've been involved in agriculture and consulting. Can you tell us a little bit, as founders of Carbonate and the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, can you give everyone watching just a little bit of background about why, how you've come into creating Carbonate and why you're really passionate about getting messages such as that portrayed in Lisa and Darren's film out there to people now in 2020?
You go first.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. We've been in this space not as long as agrarians have. Oh, actually, maybe longer. Together, we've been doing it together. But I think for us, why we really kicked off the National Regenerative Agriculture Day to start with was that there was a really bad drought back in 2017. And I think everyone really wanted to support farmers and they didn't know how to do it. So $150 million of funding was raised to support farmers in drought. And the money went to bio bale and food packages for farmers. And while that's really important from an emergency perspective, I think knowing what we know about soil health, we were just like, wow, is this really all that we can come up with? So for us, our journey sort of was like, well, obviously the message isn't out there, and what can we do? And so we thought, well, can we do a day? How do you set up a day? What does that look like? And Kelly Jones is one of our co-founders, said, well, I think anyone can set up a day. What sort of day do we want?
Let's hijack Valentine's Day.
Let's hijack Valentine's Day. Farmers and foodies hijacking Valentine's Day. And so we would had this hilarious discussion for a couple of weeks. And then we're like, actually, and I'm an accountant, so I'm just, well, you just set up so we set the charity up, and then we thought, well, and then we set the name up, and it just sort of morphed from there. We had a budget of $200, and we've
living large on the credit card of the charity.
And it really rolled out from there. People obviously care. They were caring about farmers when they offered $150 million to help. So it was really a case of just helping people be aware that there is so much power in this regenerative agricultural story, that when we repair the land, we repair we have less exposure to drought. We have better environmental outcomes all around the place, and we get a lot better food out of that as well. And so part of the story was to connect the foodies and the people in the city, to let them know that, one, there are a lot of farmers out there that are doing things differently and repairing the land at the same time. They're being tremendously productive and making beautiful food. And secondly, that if you're in the city, there is something really, really important you can do, and that's choose where your food comes from, because that signal goes back to the farmers, and farmers are really quite adaptive, and they will find a way through to supply what people want. And so wherever we buy the ordinary bland, nutrient-free food that comes out of the chemical system, that's what we'll continue to get. But if we take the time and effort to find out where our food's grown, and to find out how that farmer is caring for the land and doing things differently and producing something that's really different, then that signal goes through to farmers. And we can change what's going on in the world of farming really fairly quickly by doing that. And we know from films like what Darren and Lisa have put out that we can repair the land really quickly as well. So as soon as that signal goes through, the farmers will change, and our environmental outcomes and the quality of our food will change relatively quickly as well.
You said an interesting thing about getting foodies and getting people in the city. Do you realise, and this is my point of view, do you realise that, and did you realise at the time how strategic putting it on Valentine's Day has been?
We wanted everybody to love their farmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this journey too is about, all farmers. I think that all farmers at some level really, really believe that they're looking after the land. Every farmer and their families really are supportive in terms of their mindset about looking after their land. They're just at different places, and they're at different knowledge spaces. So, that whole thing about heart your farmer, whether you're a chemical farmer or a permaculture farmer or a biodynamic farmer, at some level, every farmer is actually wanting to care for their land and for their family. And it's just that knowledge, and the way that we express that and we communicate that is how we bring everyone on the journey. I think if there's criticism, really a lot of criticism, then it just, it turns people away. So I think that's probably the thing.
Given that all four of you have been on this journey and this morphing of regenerative agriculture as a term. You know, I mean, in the last, well, literally the last 10 years, let's say, from the time that I remember when Joel first came out here, and that term was you know, was still pretty marginalised, but you've been using other terms and so on. Like, Daz, do you feel like that the headway of the entire picture is being you know, propelled with this title of regenerative agriculture? Do you feel that what you've seen in this, well, not just the last 10 years, but, you know, for all intents and purposes, do you feel that it's the game breaker? Do you think it's the one that's breaking down the walls and bringing more people to the narrative?
I think so. I mean, I'll look at the US, for example. Ethan Rowland or Ethan Soloviev did a really good paper, I think, 2 years ago on the evolution and the power of the term and all of the rest of it. If anyone wants to look at that. And one of the things that he was looking at was the pathways to adoption. And he looked at it through 3 different strands. So he looked at it through that regenerative agriculture, from his perspective in the United States at least, had 3 different entry points. One was through holistic management, and that was pretty powerful through the grazing sector, which it has and continues to be. And now Alan Savory's work, and particularly when he did his famous TED talk in 2014 and you know, all of that stuff that followed, that propelled that message and that strand of regenerative agriculture. Then he also looked at the no-till movement, and you know, no-till as a form of cropping-based agriculture took a fair while for people to latch onto, you know, to put away their plough and to swap. Yeah, of course, they swapped that out with herbicide, but it had some pretty big ramifications both here and in the United States as a system. And so the leap for those people to shift from, say, no-till to doing cover crops and all of that sort of thing, which is now a government sanctioned and supported activity through their Natural Resource Conservation Service or their Soil Conservation Service, is really big. And then the third strand was through the Regrarians movement, which is aligned with the Keyline movement and the permaculture movement and all of that. That was another movement which, when they looked at the 3, the biggest shift that they could see was actually through the no-till. So the likes of people like Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta and all of those sorts of characters. So the sort of people, like, we've been sort of honing in on the American Midwest for a long time, because I felt originally that if you change the American Midwestern farmer, well, then you change the world's farmers. Coming back to Polyface, we thought, well, if we can change the American consumer, then we'll change global agricultural policy, because American ag policy, pretty well every other country in the world follows that. So it was quite strategic, the step that we took when we pitched to whom we pitched Polyfaces. We didn't pitch it to farmers. We pitched it squarely at consumers, because we believe that they'd be the people, like Mike said, who would drive consumption patterns. And if that happened in the US, well, then, just like so many trends globally, then that would change in the world. So yes, it's been, I think regenerative agriculture is, let's say, less pejorative than some of the terms that have been before us, you know, in permaculture, organic farming, biodynamics, those sorts of things. And so as a producer, it's got less, you're not going to get as bashed about by those in your locale if you're a producer who takes on cover cropping, because it's not that different, and it's not uncommon. I mean, I've got I get this magazine every month or whatever, ground cover from the GRDC, and there's lots of the Grain Research Development Corporation. So every cereal producer in Australia gets a copy of this, and there's lots of stuff on cover crops in there. There's lots of stuff. So, you're seeing elements of what hasn't been part of orthodoxy actually entering into the orthodoxy, and it's interesting to bear witness to that. Whereas if you look at the stories of permaculture or the stories of holistic management, keyline, that's taken 50 years to get anywhere, right? This has been relatively quick because I don't think the entry point is as radical.
Because you look at say, someone like Charles Massey presenting so many different individual farmers that people can relate to and say, oh, this is a grain farmer, this is a smaller scale operation, this is a bigger one, this person's doing this one's doing cattle, this is doing chickens, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a book that has enabled him to go around and talk to that side that you were just talking about, to talk to the consumer. Do you, Mike, do you think that it needs to be a double-pronged attack, but which is leading? Which one do you think is leading off what Darren has just said? The importance of getting the farmers to change, but how important is it for us to keep getting that mainstream message out there, and is it working?
I think it really is starting to get some traction. We are talking about regenerative agriculture now. I mean, when I started in this field, we used to talk about biological agriculture because we were looking at building the biological diversity in the soil. And, that's a bit of a boring term, and people were talking about sustainable agriculture because, we want things to be sustainable. But when we looked at it, the shape that we're in at the moment, a lot of the ground has been damaged. A lot of our farming efforts up until now have done a lot of ecological damage. And really, we want to repair that damage. So we want it to be regenerative, not just sustaining what we're currently doing, but actually rebuilding the soil. And when we started the charity, the reason we focused on carbon and carbon of 8%, a lot of people don't realise that Australia, up and down the east coast of Australia, they took soil tests back in the 1830s, and we had an average soil carbon of around 12%. And now in a lot of the agricultural ground, that carbon level is down under 1%. And that is a huge difference. And it's really difficult to farm in soil that's that degraded. So from my perspective as a farmer, I was wanting to know how to repair that. Now, the one sort of entry point that we didn't really mention was chemicals, and my experience personally was with chemical poisoning. And at that point in time, we were chemical farmers, and I was looking at the impact on my own health, and the thing that really changed my health was a change in diet. So at the same time I was learning about soil repair, I was learning about the impact of food on personal health. And then all of a sudden I went, but hold on, we're growing the food. And if we're growing the food with a heap of chemicals on it, isn't that making everybody else sick as well? So I thought, no, we can actually do better than that. We can do better than that. So I wanted to make sure that as I learned, everything that we were talking to farmers about, we were trying to do on our own farm. That one of my early mentors was a gentleman, Dr. Arden Anderson, who's a medical physician in the States and also a very well-known teacher of biological agriculture. Brilliant man. And one of the first things that I learned was if we're putting soluble nutrients in the soil, we need some sort of a carbohydrate with it, which that means sugar. So I was on the back of the fertilizer truck putting sugar in with my single super. So I was the talk of the pub for a little while.
You weren't sweet enough. You had to add sugar.
Yeah, wasn't sweet enough. But it was doing stuff like that helped us to understand, what we can practically do and what we can't practically do. And one of the questions that quite often comes out is, permaculture, well, isn't that just small farms? Organic agriculture, it tends to be on the coast. Is this scalable? Can we do it on a larger scale? And I'd love to hear, Darren and Lisa travel all over the world, but my own personal knowledge is that we can do it on a larger scale. Yeah, we use different equipment, and yes, we've got to look at nature a different way. We've got to start to work with nature, with the solutions that nature has to the things that we're trying to manage. But it is absolutely scalable.
How do you feel about that, Daz? Are you seeing the scalable application of these principles? Ian Lillington has mentioned here, is there a standout farm? Are there standout examples of this?
There's tons all over the place. I mean, as you mentioned before, Costa, if we look here in Australia, a book like The Call of the Reed Warbler by Charlie Massey profiles, I don't know, but it's, it'd have to be 100 or so farms or farms across the country, and they're of all scales. So, scale is really not a matter. It's just a matter of management intent. So, Australia has I think Australia at the moment has, if we look at organic agriculture, we have roughly half of the certified agricultural land on the planet. We have by far the largest area of certified organic agriculture in the world. Now, part of that is because we have some very large cattle stations which are certified organic. Now, some people might say, well, they're organic by neglect, but they're actually not. They're organic by really good management, because you just can't, let some cows go wild out in a station and expect that that's going to work. You need to still care for them and sell them. And so you look at the Hegarties in the southwest of, in the grain belt of Western Australia. They're as big a farmers as you can get. As far as cereal producers are concerned, and so on. So, the whole scale thing is it's as big. The farms can be as big and they can be as small as anyone intends them to be. It's really not an issue now.
So, I know I sort of touched on this a little bit not long ago, in terms of saying, do you feel like there's headway? Like, do you feel like there needs to be yet another amplification of the message out there to, you mentioned foodies, Mike, and Lisa, you mentioned it as well. And you've just taken your journey now to the front line in terms of opening a food service business. What's the pulse going all the way to that far extreme now, which you've always been totally focused around your food, but to be on the front line as a face serving food, what's people's reaction? Are they open to this message that we're talking about, or is it kind of just clunking along?
Well, as Charles said, a lot of the farmers that he met, they either went organic because of illness, because of finances, they couldn't afford the chemicals anymore. And we work all over the world, and we meet lots of amazing people doing amazing projects and with amazing farms. And I suppose it is similar. Some people do it because they do get an illness and they're looking at their diet, like Mike. But then a lot of people are actually thinking about the environment and thinking about their children and their grandchildren or the community, and they want to leave the place, better. I've always said that every dollar that you spend every day, you're supporting a business or a producer, and you can support a business that's helping to and a producer that's helping to regenerate the planet, or you can support someone who's helping to destroy the planet. So every person every day can make a difference. And some people find it hard because they're in cities. So, we recommend to look for, organic shops, look for farmers markets, and then take next steps to actually have relationships with farmers. I mean, our cafe, everything that we serve, well, not everything, because we do get some coconut. But it would be...
Coconut and Castlemaine?
No, we're working on it.
It must be like 95% on...
Yeah, it'd have to be at least.
Like we know we're getting, eggs from one of our clients. We're getting retailer eggs from our best friends. We're getting ham from best friends and bacon from best friends. Like we...
well, you know us, Costa. I mean, we've been on this journey for a long time. I mean, and in this industry for a long time. We're not mucking around. I mean, we're very serious about the outcomes and what we put on the plate. It's a representation of us. And that's, so.
And we have, our customers are incredible. So obviously, I mean, we have not advertised and we are super busy and we've got very, very, very supportive customers. 75% of every day is return customers. And it's simple food, but it's beautiful, local, organic, biodynamic. So the flavour is incredible and the nutritional value is incredible. So you don't have to do much to it.
But the supply chain, Costa, is, I worked in I worked as an organic retailer. That's where I met my darling nearly 30 years ago. And back then here in central Victoria, it was much harder to get organic food than what it is now. So that's one little example. But then the other thing to your point or to your question is that when we look at the likes of the Danones of the world and the General Mills of the world and all of these big, the Unilevers and all of those big corps who are talking to clients and associates of ours around the world, in not only just the US but in Europe as well, there's a lot going on. So I think that when you get the corporates, I mean, they don't do stuff just to make up the numbers. They do it because they keep an eye on things. They see trends. And they want to be there ready to go when it goes. So I think that, and also the other thing that's happened, of course, with COVID is, I mean, we've surveyed a lot of our members because we've got about 2,000 members around the world in about 65 countries. And we've surveyed them and seen asked them, what's the impacts that COVID have had on your farm business? And most of them have said it's been really, really positive, that it's actually, and a lot of people would know this already, it's been, like a lot of people have said, they've had to look more locally for their food because one of the first things that a lot of people did was they got the scarcity bug that's in all of us. And so they started to look locally. Where's my food come from? Am I going to be secure? Am my family going to be secure? Where's my farmer? And so there was that. And that sort of carried on to really good business and a different way of interaction. I mean, I wish I had taken some shares out on Square or something like that because, all of these digital interfaces which are helping that consumer to produce a connection which wasn't quite there before. It's that's clearly motoring along.
A lot of people also were looking at nutrient-dense food because they thought, okay, well, we have to look after our health. So, I think a lot of people did start thinking, okay, well, how can we get the best quality?
Well, we had a woman come and deliver us some flour from the Wimmera. She's a biodynamic farmer, and she said people were pretending that they needed flour, bulk flour and just crapping on about because they got that scarcity bug and they wanted to buy 200 kilos of her flour because they thought that the world was going to end. But at the same time, they didn't want to just get any flour. They didn't just want to get a Manildra from the supermarket. They wanted to get something that was really nutritious. I think it's on the up. There's no doubt about that. You see it in the supermarkets too, if you pay attention as well. Just the amount of aisles, how things are being normalised.
Yeah. Do you think, and Mike, you touched it a little bit earlier, and Helen, do you think that scarcity and concern about health, do you think that's leverage engaging that next level of traction around diet to be a leverage tool to get people more connected with this?
Yeah,
Sure.
Costa, I think, your question previously around, what are the things that are going to amplify this? I think it's just like diversity in the soil. It comes from many parts, It's basically a multi-pronged approach to how we get messaging, with foodies, with farmers, looking at different, and health is one of the big things coming through. For us, I think the knowledge around the incredible benefits of soil health, plant health, nutrient health is really catching on. And even if you're not, you're not a big nature person, that could be a thing that you're really concerned about your health. And even if you're not interested in your health, you're really concerned about the wildlife. So that's the thing that you want to focus on. And if you're a mum with kids and you don't really care so much about what you're eating, but you're really worried about your kids, what they're eating, then it's like all of this interweaving, it's like the mycelium happening that's going on and charging and creating this ripple effect. So I think that is the thing and what's so beautiful about Regen Ag is that there are so many woven stories in this space. And it's a beautiful community of environment. And so it's really easy to just fall in love with the conversations and the stories because they're so beautiful. And so I think that's what everyone loves about regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, Costa, I was going to ask you, what gives you excitement? I mean, you've sort of made this space of a celebrity gardener, nearly, but that's not what drives you. You've obviously got something inside of you that you just love the gardening and you love that connection to nature. So what are you seeing and hearing when you talk to people?
Yeah, good one, Mike. And I mean, Daz knows, my interest in the land and farming and farm design and the importance that the key line and everything about what Percy Yeoman's brought to land planning and scales of permanence. I mean, that has resonated and stuck with me right through all of my study. And when I talk about that and when I see that and when I apply that, whether that's the scale of permanence in someone's yard or on a broader scale, I mean, those sorts of things are really what drive me, because it does say to people, where do you live? Like literally on a hill near the water or near a river, and what's the land mean to you? And to be able to engender that kind of questioning and do that is what I love, because when you see people start to fall in love with the world around them, then they will start to ask the deeper questions. And, I think the word regenerative, just as a term, it doesn't imply a camp. So it doesn't bring with it sort of, from my point of view, and not that it's the one size fits all, but it certainly is a one banner that embraces all. And from that point of view, without that, the baggage and without the canisters, it's a great conversation starter, particularly for that mainstream non-connected or kind of semi-orbiting individuals that are kind of, as you said, Helen, could be the mum, could be the dad suddenly getting an interest, or could be grandpa saying, hey, have you thought about buying this, or whoever that is, whether they're the foodie, whether they're the citizen scientist entomologist concerned about the fact that there's no insects on their windscreen when they drove for 8 hours, and that sort of jolted them to connect with Pollinator Week, which they then met and learnt about native bees, and suddenly that opened up their connection to native plants and how they are actually in a metronomic connection with the whole ecosystem here that most people have sort of marginalised as scrub and bush and just gone, oh, well, just put a freaking chain through it and grow something there. So I see the story options as wide open. And, when I see a new generation of people start to take some of those narratives on, I go, well, that's great, and whether that's Gaiman, who put out his 2040 film, that's gone out to a group of people and he's exposed a certain crowd at the time when they were ready, and that hooked them. And I know that Charlie Arnott is working on a project at the moment, which is going to, connect a farmer, foodie and an eater, and sort of start to recraft this narrative. And for me, I think back to when Darren and Lisa and Kim Cruz had Joel out here on one of the very first trips, and the walls that were up against it, and then the fact that through all of their individual works, and Nick and Kirsten and Ben, all of the work that they did, slowly opened doors, and then they all went into their different journeys, bringing that along, and I know Kim did a lot of work with NRMs who were, they were like closed shop about this media kind of approach, but now they're on board, and through the work that you've been doing, on the ground, and embracing that too, of course, Mike and Terry, and there's lots of people I can name, but yeah, that's what I'm not one to go, oh well, I know that, oh well, you're just doing that again. No, I go, no, do it again, like rebadge something, like get that message out there, keep it fresh, because, we may have been riding this horse for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but we need people in the crowd cheering, and we need to give them new races to run, new ideas to challenge them. And whether that's Charlie, and a Call of the Reed Warble, that's again, it's another tool that benefits all of us, because it's bringing new people into the conversation, and whether that's on Australian Story, as you said, Daz, and he was on that, and whether that was the work that Peter was doing, in terms of his natural sequence farming, and how that then piggybacked and drew people. So yeah, I'm just constantly, and much like Daz in terms of your teaching and what you do, and just exposing people to the like, Zach Bush, suddenly he's putting a slant on the dietary side of regenerative agriculture that hasn't been MD'd so hard as what he's doing it. So that's what keeps me so energetic and fresh about it, because there's so many voices.
Exactly.
Regenerating the regenerative message, let's say, to relevance. We live in this, it scrolls, but as Daz said, this film that everyone's just watched, and as Ian asked here, he's more interested in replicability. He asked, so he said, I wasn't so, he got the bit about scalability, but replicability, we need, that replication, but it doesn't have to be dead set the same, let's say.
Yeah.
What was that, Daz?
I was just going to say, it'll never be the same. I mean, everyone's got a different context. Big part of our job is trying to have people establish their own context, which is their enterprise context, who they are, why you do what you do, and then see if that will marry up with the landscape context and where it's at, because the landscape is where it's at and you're at where you're at. And then you've got to apply, somehow put that together with what you want as an enterprise, you know, where you are financially, where you are socially, where you are in your age and capabilities. And so, you know, in terms of replicability, absolutely. I mean, I should say though, what's interesting about the film, and I know that we've highlighted a superhuman in terms of, and a family, in fact, of superhumans. And it's one of the things that we often have to contend with, that when you put someone who's got those sorts of almost superhuman powers of diligence and application and all of the rest of it, you know, are the rest of us who aren't so endowed as capable. And that's one of the big challenges that we have. And that's where a lot of people are not going to have a polyface. I'll use the word just, but they may just be a sheep producer, or they may just be a cattle producer, or they may be just a cereal producer, but they'll do that in a way which is so much better than what it was before. And as Mike said, you know, will increase landscape function, increase biodiversity, hopefully improve their financial and their family lives and the environment that they live in, the community that they contribute to. So I think in terms of replicability, absolutely, but it's really about what you can do and how that's going to meet where you and your land is at, and where your community's at, and where your climate's at, ultimately.
Now, I know, Helen, we've just ticked over 9:30 and people have been online now for a few hours. So I just saw a comment here from Robin Todd. I'm a community garden coordinator, and the amount of people growing their own food at the moment has gone through the roof.
And on the roof.
And gone on the roof.
Yeah. We were in Brooklyn. Our friends Asher and Zara. How big was it?
Oh, it was a naval shipyard building. It was enormous. They had like a hectare of roof.
A hectare of rooftop garden. 2.5
acres.
And then
just in one area. It was massive.
And then Zara was hired as the market garden for a huge apartment block. So she was actually growing all the food to this huge apartment block on the roof. But also, I mean, there are so many incredible projects like Carbonate screened Kiss the Ground's latest film recently. And we have a relationship with Kiss the Ground where people who go to cafes and restaurants that are connected to them in LA and Santa Barbara, they can support a farmer to do our workshops. So
or Savoury Institute workshops, or Soil Health Academy workshops.
So when you think about that, there's
as a tip instead of a tip.
Yeah, they can.
It goes to the farmer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, things like this. I mean, that is incredible. You can eat out in LA. And you can donate money to a farmer so he can do a workshop.
I think the waiters are too happy with it, but anyway.
I mean, that's, you know, Kiss the Ground, they're an organisation who are really walking the talk because they're doing so many different things. There's so many incredible projects happening all over our global village. And I just say to people, you know, people say, do you have hope? And I say, no, I don't have hope. I have a deep knowing that it's happening, and just keep going, like do what you can do today.
And I want to just tell a little story. I picked up something that Joel said in the movie, and he said that it needs to be, you know, visually beautiful and sensually beautiful. And one of the things that I saw a couple from Argentina did a YouTube years ago, and within the first 2 minutes of that video, they said that nothing's truly sustainable until it's also beautiful. And there's no doubt nature can be magnificently beautiful. And as far as being able to replicate, our opportunity here as farmers is to recreate our landscape in a way that we've never thought of it. You know, when I was a chemical farmer and I'm more concerned about, you know, getting the face mask and the overalls and everything else on, I wasn't looking at the landscape from the point of view of creating any colour patterns on it or, you know, where the trees were going to be and where the farm was going to be. And So I wasn't creating the landscape. I was more reacting to nature. And, you know, an insect would turn up and my first thought would be, well, how do I kill that insect? Instead of trying to understand nature and go, well, why is that insect here? What imbalance has brought that insect into my plant? So one of the things that I've really enjoyed as a farmer is that I've come out of this sort of reactive war with nature and I've come into this creative relationship with nature now where I can go, and we make a bit of a joke where we sit on the front veranda and we tell people that we live in heaven on earth. And so we sit down having our cup of tea and we look at the landscape and we go, well, what does heaven look like? You know, how about and in this Argentinian farm, they were growing sorghum. So they had red sorghum and then white sorghum and then red sorghum and then white sorghum. So they were making patterns and colours in the landscape, you know, and I, as a farmer, I've never thought of that. So it's just added a whole new dimension to creating great food. And I think that whatever we do, if we connect to that beauty of nature and we look to enhance that beauty, then it will just ripple out from there, you know?
I've got a really funny story I want to share with everyone. We're planting actually multi-species crops at the moment. And Mike bought how many tons of seed? Was it?
It's about 7.5 tons of seed of different mixes to put in for the cover crop.
For the cover crop?
Yeah.
So seed is light. That's a lot of seed.
That's 7,500 kilograms.
Yeah. So anyway, I decided that I wanted to put some meadow flowers through this species, right? So I get in touch with this really awesome crew at the Gold Coast called, I just typed in meadow flowers, and these are just basically, they put together. And so I thought, I'm going to buy some meadow flower seeds and I'm going to add them into, you know, like sunflowers are nice, but imagine poppies and like, I looked at the price and I got my little 1 kilogram bag, a lot of money. And I came to Mike and I went, hey, darling, I've got some meadow flower seeds for us.
And I said, darling, have you got any idea how much seed we're actually planting? And she went, no, you actually got 2 kilos.
I got 2 kilos.
Yeah, so she's got 2 kilos of meadow flowers. And I said, darling, we've got 7,500 kilos. So where would you like to plant your 2?
It's about diversity, right?
Yeah.
This is about, you know, those little flowers are going to pop right up out of there and they're just going to look amazing. So,
I mean, that's what's so beautiful driving around Europe when, you know, in springtime and it's just fields of those gorgeous flat mixed species, the pure, beautiful meadows. Oh.
As are our beautiful Australian grassland, native grasslands. When you've got all of that as well. I mean, it's gorgeous to drive past. You know, whether it's the Danthonia in flower or whether it's that beautiful bronze that you get of the kangaroo grass, the Themida, or red grass when it's really, really red, and all of those. So it's certainly something that makes it better.
I look forward to seeing some photos of your meadow.
Yeah. The poppy, poppy, 100 metres away.
It'd be like, where's the poppy?
Yeah, well, one day it might be, where isn't the poppy?
You know, Mike, you said it really sweetly and succinctly there, because I was going to ask you, you know, what do you really want? And you answered that question before I asked it, because, you know, that whole idea that you've put down the war narrative, and you've actually built a relationship, and you cherish that relationship, and that relationship is now so loving and sensual in that sense that you want to put flowers in there too. Like, you know, these things don't come if you got combat fatigues on and you're going out with masks and spraying spraying everything because you're in battle mode.
And what kid is going to want to come onto a farm that's at war? You know, again, another thing, and Joel is one of my heroes because the way he's approached, layering the enterprises on the farm, but also the way he's approached bringing the kids back into the enterprise. Family farms have been the heart of agriculture, and we are losing that to some extent because kids look at the whole battle fatigue thing, the chemical suit, and they go, I'm just not that interested in that. But if we turn it into something that is creative and is fun and actually is really quite profitable when you go away from having to use all of these crazy inputs to win the battle, and you come back to a natural abundance and a natural fertility in nature, then farming does turn into a good business. We don't have to own half of the state to make money out of it. We can have a lot smaller farm. And our farm is 3,000 acres. That was probably a reasonable sized farm in this area 10 years ago. Now most of the farms are 2 or 3 times that size. But, we're still doing okay. And we don't have to have 2 or 3 times the area to have a profitable business. And it's certainly, a lot more fun when it gets creative.
Do you think, I suppose this for all of you, I mean, taking away the goggles and looking at it in that dollars and cents side of the equation, are you seeing the medium size and the smaller size farming arrangements actually working? Are people making a reasonable life out of them, or is it really hard going to compete and make a dollar?
I think a lot of them are still struggling because we haven't got a full level of support from the cities yet. People haven't quite understood the difference between really good quality food and food that's mass produced. One of the groups that we work with, the Bionutrient Association in the States, and Dan Kittredge did some research on carrots, and one of the things that they came out with was that there was a 22,000% difference between the worst carrot they tested and the best carrot they tested.
Wow.
Now, if you put that on a scale from 0 to 100, most of what was sitting on our supermarket shelves was sitting between 6 and 16. So the best carrot was sitting up here at 100, and most of what the mass-produced carrots are is sitting around 16, maybe, 20. So if you think about that, if we eat carrots that are sitting up at 100 instead of carrots that are sitting down at 20, we can actually feed the population on 1/5 the area that we're currently farming. So we haven't actually got an overpopulation problem on the earth. We've got an undernutrition problem. And if we change the farming methods and we got carrots now all sitting up near 100, then we wouldn't need to eat nearly as much. We wouldn't need as much land to produce those carrots. So people, if they get the power of this and they go, well, hold on, I will pay 5 times more for that carrot because it's 5 times the nutrition of the other one. Or even if I just pay twice as much for from a farm that I know, that the farmer cares about the land and they're rebuilding the ground. Even if they were just to do that, that will change things dramatically.
I think people don't realise that organic isn't necessarily that much more expensive. If you go and do a price check at supermarkets and then at the farmers market, prices are pretty similar. Like the biodynamic meat that we buy is usually cheaper than one of the butchers in town.
Or the supermarket.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, yeah, and supermarket. So I think a lot of people just think that it's still really expensive, but also if you buy in bulk, which we have always done, directly from the producers, then it's there in the pantry, in the freezer, and you can save a lot of money because you don't go to the supermarket. If you've got everything at home bulk, and even if you haven't got space to grow food, you've got a balcony and you can grow some herbs and some lettuce, or just something that you can add to your bulk, products. You actually stop going to the supermarket, and it simplifies life so much when you're not driving to a supermarket and, buying things every day because you're, following a recipe and you want to do this and do that. If you have it all in the freezer, in the fridge, and in the pantry, it's so much more enjoyable going to a farmer's market once a week.
Costa, can I just comment on from the farmer perspective and the profitability? I think one of the things about regenerative agriculture is that as a regenerative farmer, we're actually not mining the soil. So while the yields may not be as high, you're not spending as much on the inputs, and so you're actually, you're basically putting that all of that, increasing the carbon in the soil. You're not mining it. You may not be getting as high yields, but that's and you can still get high yields. But I suppose what we're seeing here is that, while the yields might not be high, we're getting more nutrient density in the food. We're getting higher quality food, and it's costing less to grow because we're using the soil, the carbon in there, to create all the diversity and bring that nutrient and keep the bugs away and all of that. So as well as that, you're looking at landscape health and function, and so that's the thing. It's not necessarily about the
and that aspect of productivity. That the trickiest part's the transition. I'm sure that Darren and the work that they've been doing over the years, it's that transition away from chemicals. It's trying to get off this addiction that we have to those chemical inputs. And that sort of first, couple of years, if you can hook into a network like the Regarian networks and learn from everybody else's experience, then the transition's not nearly as hard. And as we rebuild the soil from, that under 1% carbon, and we get it back up to 3, 4, 5, then the yields are better. The abundance of nature starts to kick back in, and it's much more less inputs for greater return. So by then the yields are as good as anybody else in the district. It's not, it's not something where you have to accept lower yields simply because you're moving into an organic system. Once you understand how nature works, and we run through that transition period where we've sort of got out of this completely degraded soil back into a soil that's starting to get some function again, then the system will kick back into gear, and nature is tremendously abundant, at that point in time.
So
Costa, I was going to say, Costa, that at least Western humans, we spend the lowest proportion of our income on food in history. So food is, which goes to Mike's point before, is that, we've been sucked in by the industrial food system to pay as little as possible on food, and that productivity in agriculture is actually determined by the labour unit ratio to food production. That's ultimately what it's about, right? So we don't go about trying to increase the number of farmers to produce food. We're actively trying to decrease the number of farmers to produce the food. That's a really big part of it, and to do it cheaply or cheaper. And I'd say to that too, that one of the things that a lot of people, and Joel Salatin talks a lot about this, is that like a lot of people, if they're producers, if they got retail, then that would be fantastic. So I'll use the statistics in the US are this, that in 1970, the average farm gate price as a proportion of the retail dollar was 40 cents in the dollar. It's now around about 8 cents in the dollar, right? So that's the terms of trade over that 50-year period have changed irrevocably. And like John F. Kennedy, the president, said, farmers sell wholesale, buy retail, and pay the freight both ways. So, it's a really poor starting position. The other thing which is interesting, I'm sure the statistics are similar here in the US, from the US to here, is that three quarters of the United States farmers, agriculture is not their primary source of income. And Helen would know this in her work in accounting, that it's from what I can tell, it's somewhat similar. There's a lot of producers, land managers, farmers in Australia for whom agriculture is not the only source of income in the household. So I often have a problem with this almost requirement that a producer becomes financially independent of the landscape they manage, when they're trying to do so with these structural impediments to them doing so, like having incredibly cheap food. Because even organic food is in relative terms incredibly cheap, but people choose to do all of the other things in life that they choose to do, and which is a big part of what Joel's challenge to people is, because they say, I can't afford that. And he goes, well, what are all the other things that you're spending on in your life, which really are superfluous when you're knocking 10 or 20 years off your lifespan, and you're damaging you're funding the damage to the planet that you are. So, which is all of the external costs which people don't seem to consider, and definitely are not paying for. So, to this whole, so I have an issue with, obviously, with the requirement or the notion that a farmer needs to be immediately financially successful, because it's a really hard gig, period, let alone if you're going to go and try and make these transitions. So, a lot of people do make it. They have to be incredibly fiscally disciplined, particularly those who are working in the commodity agriculture sector, because they're not price setters, they're price receivers. And so it's a really, really tough gig. So hats off to anyone who can get through that transition phase, especially for a lot of them who've got debt to equity ratios which suck. And, it's a tough gig. But yes, there are people, and quite a few people, because there's a whole set of disciplines, which I suppose is what we're ultimately getting to here. There's a lot of disciplines that you need to take on. Like Mike, when he went through his transition, he would have had to have learned a stack of new stuff and applied a whole set of new disciplines to what you're doing. And that takes time, and you'll slip up, just like when you walked, you didn't stand up and start running straight away. You fell over a few times, and hopefully you'll get the support.
I certainly tripped over a few times.
Yeah, well, that's it. So it does take time, and everyone's going to be different, which goes to that superhuman perspective, that some people will do better because they have a different set of skills and a different context, different abilities, that sort of thing. So I don't like to say that you're going to go from here to here, because you may not be built that way, and your context may not allow you to do that as quickly as others, and so on. So that needs to be borne in mind, I think.
And if humans would get more into, you go to Europe or even, big cities where there's great markets in Australia, and people shop, at the markets regularly. If consumers can go to farmers markets or markets and shop there regularly, don't just go and buy a jar of pickles or a jar of jam, go and shop at your farmer's market or at your local market.
And organise your food otherwise.
I used to buy 7 dozen eggs from our friend at the monthly farmer's market, because we only had it once a month, which was torture. So, okay, how much I would buy 7 dozen eggs because the shelf life was long enough. I would buy, 6 pumpkins. I would just buy bulk as much as I could to last us the month. Thankfully, now we have a weekly farmers market, so it's a lot easier. But you can actually buy a lot from your market in bulk.
This can make a lot of difference to those farmers. I mean, we mentioned Charlie Arnott before, and one of his favourite sayings is, "Who's your farmer?" and when you start to know who your farmer is, and whether you make that connection at the farmers markets, or you have friends in the country and you seek out somebody that can supply you directly, when you're in that direct relationship, you can actually get better food. Quite often you can get it cheaper than what you're getting from the supermarket.
Exactly.
And most times you're probably doubling that farmer's income, because they've now gone from 8 cents in the dollar to 20 cents or 30 cents in the dollar,
Exactly. Like people say, oh, you go to blah, 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 lettuce is 15, 20 cents. Why would you want to buy a lettuce for 20 cents?
Yeah,
like that, the farmer's getting negative, 50 cents. And
or $1 milk, all of that stuff,
like
it goes.
The supermarkets, $1 milk, $1 bread. It's like, how can you screw the farmers anymore? Like, don't support those people that are screwing up farmers. Go directly to your farmer and support them.
Yeah.
So, I know that we could, I could throw a question in the block again, but it's 3 minutes from 10. So I thought, what about, give me each your final frame, your final thought, you just what you're seeing, combined with what you want to work on and help craft as the narrative to bring everyone along. What tell me, I don't know, Helen and Mike, you're both on the screen at the moment, so we'll start with you both.
Yeah, I'll say, I think National Regenerative Agriculture Day, farmers and foodies hijacking Valentine's. What would you like to contribute? What kitchen table conversation, what event do you want to put on? What restaurant do you want to go to say, I want restaurants to put on a National Region Ag Day? What can you do? I think that would just be a wonderful way to actually start, get your school involved. Do something for National Regenerative Agriculture Day. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to say the same thing. I think the National Regen Ag Day, growing some food at home, when you taste fresh homegrown food, or organic regenerative food direct from the farm, the taste sensation is so much different. So, fall back in love with food and fall back in love with your farmer, and those two actions will really change our world.
Yeah.
I think, sometimes you have to have uncomfortable conversations, and within families, within partnerships, because some people say, I really want to do it, but my partner is not interested. And I know within my own family that has happened. So I think uncomfortable conversations. And if you think about our bodies and the environment always in a state of regenerating, it's just what we do to our body and what we do to the environment that, is destructive. So, if you're feeling not tip top, look at how you can add some more nutrient dense food to your body and just see how different you feel when you're buying fresh produce from a local farmer.
And,
cool. What about you, Costa?
Costa's the embodiment of all of this. I mean, he's like 75 years old. He's got not one grey hair in that hedge of his, and that's because I've seen firsthand how well he eats.
It's funny because we were cleaning up at the cafe, and there was a couple of our son's friends there, and they said, oh, stay, and was like, no, we have to go, we've got 15 minutes to get home, we're on a panel with Costa. And one of my son's friends said, oh, Costa, I love Costa. Hey, listen, how old do you reckon he is? And I said, I know how old he is. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say, by the time he goes, oh, wow, he's so young. And I was like, yeah, we are young. And Pearl said, I thought he was only like 40. And I was like, oh, thanks. You thought he was that much younger than us.
I'm not very good at all of this sort of thing, closing comments or anything like that, but
Anything.
or inspirational sort of stuff, I suppose you'd say.
It doesn't have to be inspirational.
No. Well, I mean, I'm just encouraged by a lot of what we've talked about tonight. There are a lot of really, really, like Lisa said. We don't live in a bubble, but the bubble that we do live in, you might say, is getting bigger all of the time. It's obvious. So there's a lot of people who are actually cotton on to me the fact that we're in the life business. And as I said, we are a perennial species. We're not an annual species. So start to bloody well behave like one and realise that you've got this lifespan and to contribute to yourself, to your family and to your community and to the land that nourishes you. So give it a crack. Life be in it, as the old Philip Adams said. Huh?
And just to help us all wind up, we're getting some beautiful comments from the people that are still watching us an hour and a half into this conversation, and thank you very much. We've got I am in love with all of you. Thank you so much. Inspirational discussion. Costa, I know you are such a humble person, but you really are one of my idols. So
He's our national treasure.
That's right.
yeah.
Yes, there's monuments everywhere.
So I think we've been really lucky to have you guys on the conversation with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Please.
Thank you, Darren and Lisa, for the foresight and the time and energy and effort you put into making this magnificent movie. And as I said, I think every child in the world should be watching it, and that will help them understand as they grow up the importance of their food and the importance of their food decisions,
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very kind. Thanks for having us on. We really appreciate that.
Well, I was lucky that I had a beautiful mother who taught me that nature, it's miracles in nature every day. So we grew up, loving nature and loving the environment and the magic and miracles of nature. And I would think it would be amazing if more people just took the time to connect with a bird or a bug or a butterfly or lie on the grass and...
Well, getting excited that the cherries have just come out this week.
Yeah, cherry season.
Oh my God.
Strawberry
I was going to say, I think Costa's one of those miracles of nature.
He is.
Absolutely.
You should see what's living in that beard.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for coming along and having the discussion with us. And thanks, Costa, for helping us through tonight and all your guidance. And
we love you, Costa.
Awesome. Hey, Daz, Lise, Helen, and Mike, thank you. It's been wonderful to speak, and to everyone who was with us, to everyone who's still here. I can see that there's still some of you who have hung out right till the end. Wendy and Rachel and who else is there? Ian and Helen. Thank you for joining in. And as Mike said and Darren said, and it really is about us talking about this. And as you said, Helen, starting conversations, giving gifts of local food to connect people with farmers and making that story live every day. It's not just the 14th of February. That's a pinnacle, but we are eating multiple times a day, and we're having people eat with us, and gardeners do it all the time because they proudly share their produce, but we can share we can share farmers' produce, but note it, spotlight it, put the conversation out there, share events like this, but most of all, share the food, take people to places, whether it's a cafe like what Lisa and Darren have opened, and ask.
Greentown, Castlemaine.
Yeah. But there's all these day-to-day habitual ways that we can break the confines of convenience that has been, laid over us in a very limited in a very limited corporate commercial way. And we don't have to fight that. We just need to promote the alternative and do it on a daily basis. So, yeah, you know, conversations like this are fantastic. The film lives on and carries a legacy that someone can see that and share it when you can, whether it's, you know, within your schools or within your community groups or whatever. Give it as a gift, and not just this film, but other films, links to other films, links to other projects and pages and information and websites and so on. So, you know, there's lots of things we can do to be it every day, and you know, that's it's surprising how many little windows there are to tell a yarn. So, guys, it's been wonderful, and thanks for the chance to banter.
Yasu.
Thank you.
Yasu.
Good night, everyone.
Siga.
Google Bear.
Oh, is that you in your red hat?
See ya.
Is that a hand-knitted doll?
Oh, and thanks to Biggie Boho.
Thank you,
Hey,
Biggie.
Biggie.
Thanks for our producer.
Thank you, producer.
You're awesome.
Couldn't forget, that's our wonderful technical support, who's all the way over in Portugal.
And he's freezing cold.
Yeah.
We're boiling hot. Thanks, Biggie.
Thanks, Biggie. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. See
See
you
ya.
next time.
Gotcha.
Show us the